friends, and welcome back to 155 Books. My name is Shannon and today I'm going to be doing my very first bi-monthly wrap-up. Yay! So if you watch my channel then you will know that recently I have started doing bi-monthly TBR videos, and that is creating a TBR pile for 2 months, and this is mainly because my reading pace is quite slow, but I'm also a mood reader, and I've found that actually doing bi-monthly TBRs allows me for some structure, but also for that leeway if I need to change what I'm reading as well. So the first 2 months of me doing this were May and June, and I will leave my TBR videos obviously in the description box, but like I said, they turned out great and I managed to read 10 books, and they are the books I will be sharing with you today. And because I haven't done a wrap-up video in quite some time, I'm just going to get straight into the books and hope it naturally comes to me in terms of sharing my thoughts on these books with you. So the first 4 books I will be sharing my thoughts on together because they are the first 4 volumes in the Heartstopper graphic novel series by Alice Oseman, and I of course wanted to read these after watching the Netflix Heartstopper show, which everyone is loving and obsessed with, quite rightly because it is amazing, and we are getting a season 2, which I'm so happy about, but the series that's out at the moment covers books 1 and 2 and a little bit of or volume 3, so I'm guessing maybe series 2 might be volumes 3 and 4 possibly, but yes, so I had actually read the first 3 volumes previously, so it was great to revisit those and also see the similarities to obviously the show, but I was reading volume 4 for the first time and it became my favourite of the 4 volumes I have now read, as volume 4 does touch on some more like hard-hitting themes, but it was done so well by Alice Oseman as always, as with the rest of the series, but there was just something really special about it, and yeah, it was definitely my favourite so far, and I cannot wait to read more of these when I don't know if there's going to be 1 more volume, which makes me kind of sad because I really don't want this series to be over. It's just so great, so heartwarming, but like I said, also touches on some really difficult topics. I will leave some content warnings in the description box for you, just so you can take a look at those before obviously picking these up. The next book I finished in May was a collation of poems by Sappho. These ones are translated by Mary Barnard, so this collection contains all of the poems and fragments of the surviving works of Sappho, and Sappho was a female lesbian, I believe, Greek poet, and I really enjoyed this collection of poems. I was really in the mood for some poetry when I read it, but what I loved I think more was the introduction and the conclusion of this specific edition by Mary Barnard. So obviously it gives a little bit more context to the poems, and there's a kind of discourse as well on the different translations and interpretations of some of her poems, which I also found really interesting. I would say that this is a great introduction into Greek literature if you are, obviously thinking about getting into either some Greek original literature, classical literature, or Greek myth retellings, obviously, because this one is so short, just so digestible. The only thing I would say that let me down slightly is that obviously I wanted more, and obviously some of the fragments don't really make a lot of sense, but on their own they still came across as very lyrical and beautiful, and that is why I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars overall. The next book I finished in May was a reread, and that was actually a play because I read Hamlet by William Shakespeare, and I of course loved this, reading it at the second time round, and loved it just as much, in fact not more, because there was some extra bits that I could pick out and annotate, and it was just so great, and I think rereading this is the reason why I have decided on my new Shakespeare challenge, which again I mention in my most recent TBR video, which I will link, because it just reminded me of how much I adore Shakespeare and how amazing his writing is, and just what his plays do to me. I don't know, will always be a fan. Hamlet will always be my favourite. Rereading this was great. If you haven't read it, I would recommend it. Now moving on to the books I read in June. So I was meant to finish this book in May, but it trickled into June, but that was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Atessa Moshfegh. Now, when I tell you, this book and reading this book was just a massive experience, because while reading this book, I throughout didn't feel like I was enjoying it very much, and genuinely thought it was just going to be an average sort of like 3-star read, because I didn't not like it, but I didn't love it. I was a bit confused, I had mixed thoughts, and I didn't know how to feel. And then I finished the book and I was just all over the place and had no idea how I felt, how I was feeling, and completely overwhelmed by the ending, to be honest. But in the end, after sort of ranting about my thoughts for a little while on my Instagram stories, I did come to the conclusion that this was in fact a fantastic book, and I gave it 5 stars. And I think that in itself is just amazing. So obviously it follows our main character, who is actually unnamed, so it's got the sort of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier effect. You follow a protagonist throughout who you don't know what her name is, and I didn't actually realise that until quite close to the end, which was interesting. And this character, for the most part, is a horrendous, horrible person to everyone, and obviously what you're reading is like her inner dialogue, and her inner dialogue is just disgraceful, but so is the actions and the way she treats other people and other things that she does throughout the book. I would say the biggest issue I had with it was the pacing. The pacing is all over the place, but I think that kind of adds to it in a way once you finish it. I can't really give you a synopsis of this without giving a large part of the story away, but obviously our main character is highly privileged. Both of her parents are dead. This isn't really touched on very much throughout the book, but obviously they were quite wealthy, and she has got enough money to sort of have a flat, I believe, in New York City that she doesn't have to worry about working to pay rent for, and all of these things. She's obviously got a lot sort of like going on mentally, but again, that's not really mentioned. She's just gone through a breakup, and basically to get through that, she decides that she just wants to sleep for an entire year. So she meets a therapist, and who prescribes her with lots of medication to enable her to deal with her like mental issues and to sleep through everything. But she just wants to be given everything again so that she can just sleep all the time. And then just things happen, and that's why I say the pacing is kind of a bit off, because you kind of expect this to be just about her trying to sleep, and it is, but there's other things as well, and there's flashbacks or her thinking about her past, and again her friend Reva comes and visits her quite a lot, so the book deals with sort of their relationship dynamic, and again other things that happen, but I don't want to go into it because it would spoil the book. But there is one thing that happens and is vaguely mentioned, basically a date is mentioned about halfway through the book, and then you realise that this is probably going to be a big part of the events of the book, possibly, because you're not 100% sure, because you don't understand how that could all tie in together. So I'm not going to say any more other than it's really, really cleverly written and pieced together. I did also really enjoy the writing style, like Tessa Moshfegh's writing style, her concept, just everything, and like all together it just makes a fantastic book. But like I said, while you're reading it, you won't really enjoy it, but at the end, when you realise what she's done, it'll blow your mind. By far the best book I've read so far this year, which I think is a statement in itself. So 5 out of 5 stars, loved this, will probably be harping on about it for ages. It was great. And the next book I finished in August, which I don't think I should have read so closely after my year of rest and relaxation, was Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, which was of course shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And this one has a not very similar premise, but it's another contemporary novel that deals heavily with mental health. It follows our main character, Martha, who has just been separated from her husband and moves back in with her parents. But it's also kind of not really about that, because as soon as that event happens and she moves back, or we find out that she's separated from her husband, it starts from the very beginning, basically, and it's just a sort of life history of Martha and her mental health problems and just everything that's happened to her in her life. And I still don't know how I feel about this. There were some parts I really enjoyed and really loved. Overall, I think I did enjoy the writing style. Again, I had an issue with the pacing, but my biggest problem, I think, with this is that what is wrong with Martha, the diagnosis is never given, to the point where she is given a diagnosis and it's actually blanked out in the book. And that really bothers me. And then at the end of the book, it says that the medical symptoms and descriptions provided in the book are entirely fictional, and they're just not. I actually believe Meg Mason wrote this book and someone, I don't know who, told her not to actually put the diagnosis in the book and remove it, because then it could be more widely enjoyed by people, and it wouldn't just focus on one specific group of people. I don't know, but that was the biggest issue I had, and as you can tell, it's really, really affected the way I think about this book, which is such a shame, because I do, again, really like what this book did. It did make me cry towards the end, like it does with most people. So I did, like I say, give this one 4 out of 5 stars, but I think I might put it down to 3, because I've got some issues with it still and I don't feel like they're going to be resolved. So I don't really think it deserves a 4-star because of, like I say, the issues I have with it. So it's going to be a 3 instead. And the next book I finished was Healing is the New High by Vex King. This is the second Vex King book I have read, the other one being Good Vibes, Good Life. So Vex King is a mind coach, and in his newer book he kind of uses the idea of the trauma you've faced throughout your life is what is causing you to constantly come across hurdles in your life. And it's actually something that I had noticed had been happening to me, and that's why this book came into my life at the perfect time, because Vex King basically takes you through a process of making you kind of face your traumas in a very safe space, which I also really enjoyed, and shares practices in which you can obviously help heal yourself from them, but obviously very also focuses on the fact that this is an ongoing process. But there were so many, like I said, exercises in this that really helped me. The hardest part was in the middle of the book, where you literally have to write on a piece of paper some of the hardest, most horrible things that have ever happened to you. But I genuinely feel a difference since finishing this book with the practices, like going through each and every practice. So it takes a look at your limiting beliefs due to the trauma that you have faced, and turns those into brand new beliefs that are the complete opposite. And like I said, I've seen a difference already and I love that. And I would say the one reason why I felt like this came into my life at the right time is because one thing I had noticed was that I'm kind of always in this repetitive motion in life where every single year something will happen and I'll get to the point where I get completely burnt out. My anxiety gets really bad and I get like an onset of depression and I just feel stuck again, and then I just have to start the cycle again to the point where, oh, I feel okay, this is fine, and then I'm plodding along and then it happens again. Since finishing this book, I kind of feel like, I'm not going to say that's never going to happen again. Of course, that's not the case because healing is an ongoing process, but I feel way more confident in being able to spot it earlier, I guess, or spot the things in my life that are causing it and carry out the practices that I know are going to help me and nip it in the bud before it turns into full-on burnout, anxiety and depression. And I am so glad that I have got a physical copy of this that I can go back to anytime I'm feeling like I need to. It's going to literally be my Bible that I carry with me everywhere. So it's of no surprise I of course gave this one 5 out of 5 stars, because I genuinely feel like it is going to change my life and has already changed my life, and we love that. So thank you, Vex King. The last book I finished in June was The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. This is my very first Anne Bronte book. I have read a book by both Charlotte and Emily, so I was very excited about reading obviously one by Anne, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed the feminist aspects of this book. Again, it always takes me by surprise when I read a classic novel written by a woman from the 1800s and it's got feminist themes in it. Still blows my mind. It's still very relevant today, which is actually quite sad. So this one is kind of a dual perspective book. It follows both Gilbert and Helen. So Gilbert is a resident of a village, or the area in which Wildfell Hall is, and Helen, who is recently widowed, moves into Wildfell Hall, and of course all the neighbours, being really nosy at the time, just want to get to know her and her story, and Gilbert does get to know her a little bit better than everyone else and kind of falls for Helen, but then some rumours start to come out of the woodwork, and Gilbert finds out Helen's real backstory. And I really enjoyed the dual perspective, the way it was written. It's kind of written in a letter style format, so Gilbert is writing a letter to his friend, and within that letter he's got letters from Helen that explain, like I say, her backstory, and it all just comes together really neatly and nicely at the end. I really enjoyed the writing. Like I've already mentioned, I really liked some of the feminist themes and other themes throughout this book. I would say I did get a little bit bored towards the middle, and I feel like it could have been a lot shorter and needed editing down a little bit. If it had been edited down, it would have probably been a 5-star read for me, but just because of those aspects and bits that I got a bit bored in, I felt like it was a bit too long-winded, it was a 4-star, but I really want to read more by Anne Bronte because I really enjoyed this. I of course read this one for Brontelong, and there was a live show discussion where we all got into the nitty-gritty of some of the details in this book, so if you want a little bit more detail on not just my thoughts but loads of other people's, I will obviously link that in the description box. It was so great to be a part of the live show and discuss this book with everyone. We were laughing our heads off. It was just such a nice experience, and it left my evening just with me feeling really happy inside, which is always great. So those are all of the books I read in May and June, and I'm really hoping I have as good a reading months in July and August. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you soon in another one. Bye!